My name is Lindokuhle Sobekwa, South African photographer, working with Magnum Photos. When I went to Kenya, I started experimenting. I made a camera obscura. I was thinking about surveillance and thinking about the history of surveillance and thinking about the history of photography, the kind of camera obscura, which was, the first camera made. And then the following that, there was like different other cameras that which were made. So for me, initially, the idea was to make a camera obscura using house. So I worked with a group of students at Wajuku Art Center in Kenya, and we spent I think like 2 days trying to block all the lights. So the camera obscura basically it should be a very black box, and you open like a small hole, and that light that will come in will reflect an image upside down of the community there, of which, that is another kind of way of surveilling people, what was also used as a way of surveillance, but also there's a closer connection to photography and surveillance. So for me, I was thinking about these two connections, but I wanted to experiment with that. But that, I think it worked this following day, but it didn't translate to how I wanted it to. Because immediately when we opened the house and we closed the house, we had to like darken the house again, and which was like another hour or something. So, you know, that was like the obstacle with that. And then I decided to make camera obscura in a box. So I created like a box again. I used a magnifying glass, which the one I think I used two. One was for like far-sighted people, and another one was for like close-sighted people. So, it was interesting when we put those, it could not focus on people that were very close to me. It could focus on the people that were far. And same applies with the one that was close-sighted one. Even if I was photographing a landscape, the landscape was sort of narrowed focus in one area, which was sort of like creating this kind of cycle of sharpness, and the rest is sort of like bled. So for me, I was thinking like also at the same time in Kenya, we were in the midst of settling my permission to make work in public spaces, which you need to do that there. It's one of the laws for like photojournalists that work there. So in Kenya, I think there's a law that I think it's recent that they passed that journalists need to get official documents to make work in public, like to photograph in public spaces. And I think also it's from what someone told me, this documentation is meant to protect the people of Kenya. I think from like photojournalists that kind of come and make images of them that probably might be problematic or something like that. So it's kind of maybe a reason for that, which I assume it might be that, from the conversation I had with a friend there. Of course, you still need permission to photograph people in the street, even if you have that document, because I ended up getting it, but there was like a little bit delay. So there was an agency that was assisting us to get all these papers sorted out. But like, because I had limited time and I needed to make work, so I had to find something that could work. So for me, putting the camera in the box was like one of the kind of solutions. And then I thought this would be interesting. Actually, I could work on the street by just putting the camera in that box and make pictures through this camera obscura. Of course, we didn't encounter any challenges because we did come across, official people, but they didn't question us a lot. So then I was able to then start making work. In a way, through that, camera obscura was another surveillance object that I can look outside. I can look people, But again, there was this kind of a bit distorted or blurred or I don't know, fragmented image that I could see of people, not the actual image. And I also made straight photograph, of people walking through areas which are heavily surveillance, even in the in the in the in the in the township areas in Kenya, and again in the city as well. So it was interesting to kind of see how people have normalized surveillance cameras, rather than kind of, questioning it, which is the same even here in South Africa. I remember the first time growing up, we saw surveillance cameras. People were concerned, who's looking at us and how are they looking at us, you know what I mean? But now it's something that people just like go by without kind of minding how it is looking at them. But also at the same time, I was interested in seeing how these cameras were looking at people outside. I made photographs inside commercial spaces like business spaces, because I went in the market, which is where you find a lot of surveillance cameras. And of course, the limitation in photographing in other places due to all these permission that we had to kind of pass through. But again, we didn't face any challenges. But I was told that there sometimes it could be a big issue with the police, and can end you in really difficult position there. But I didn't face that when I was working until we got my paper, which was like, and I was left with very few days to leave Kenya. And when I got it, I was able also to make like straight photograph in public spaces. But there's always someone like looking someone. So even if you're a photographer photographing someone, so someone somewhere is looking at you. So I mean, we are living in a time where this idea of being looked at is very, like, it's heavy. Like you feel it. Even if you're walking the street, you look back, someone is looking at you, because for the mere fact that you're carrying a camera, creates a lot of suspicion around you. And it's how you negotiate your space, how you negotiate your presence in that space, that makes people to see you as suspicion. I'm thinking of one instance where I'm so the box that I made, so the camera obscura was like this big, and there was this box that I would put in the public space, and people would be curious and like, hey, what is that? And like, come in, and they could look through there, and they're seeing people walking like, oh, this is how they're looking at us. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So you take pictures? Why? I tell them, I'm doing this and that, and we start having this conversation. So I think these are conversations that are important to have, about technology, because you like sometimes we might take it for granted that there are many people who don't understand really how this works. So having artists, I think artists are the perfect people to create dialogue and engagement around such topics. I think the role of a photographer is, to create this conversation, like create, make people engage with like digital world, like, because sometimes, people just put these surveillance. Of course, they are fighting crime, but they don't know, like what else, you know what I mean? So I think artists can be sort of the middleman that kind of make people aware of this, and make people to have a voice back to, to these technologies that we have. For example, like me, by the mere fact that I can go here, make work in Kenya, and while making work in Kenya, because I can still have conversation with someone like, oh, actually, this is how I was looking at you, and start having this conversation with the person and say, actually, do you know how that camera is looking at you? And you find out that a lot of people, they actually don't know, how they're being seen, or how is this looking at me, or how this can be helpful, to me. So I think having artists, because I've seen like other works that Edgelands has done in Kenya with other artists. So it's interesting how artists have managed to build a bridge between the kind of surveillance and art, and creating this fun and play and understanding of how these two can be of benefit to the community, but also like you know to whoever that owns the business or owns those technologies, because I mean the world is going technology, and it's important for people to also kind of understand the implications of that. So I think art kind of creates that bridge there, you know. And according to few people that I spoke to, they said having those surveillance cameras does prevent crime, because even if people trying to attempt to rob your shop or do like something wrong, when they see there's a surveillance camera, they actually, don't do it. And it is said also in many areas in Kenya, since there's these surveillance cameras, crime has actually went down. And of course, it's a different case if you think about South Africa. I mean, I'm based in Johannesburg CBD, and it's heavily surveillance place. But even in those surveillance places, crime still happen. I think like now crime has really increased in the past few years, and I think also right now they're in the midst of implementing more cameras, from China. So you know, a lot of people are saying that doesn't really work because criminals are not afraid anymore. Because even if you include the cameras, if you live in a society of 10 million unemployed youth, they have nothing to lose, and they just do what they do, So I think the solution basically, in my opinion, is to create employment. You have I mean, in a society that has a lot of poor people, you will experience such things. So the solution basically is like employment and education. I mean, here there's even like a lot of unemployed graduates. So people really like, do these things because they have nothing. You know what I mean? So it's either you fight crime or you fight poverty, or you fight both. I don't know. I'm interested in making work that communities can also engage and kind of talk back. So for me, working with students of that same community, they can continue that project, on their own. But for me, even bring like, your elderly people in the community, and we start having this conversation about that. Basically, the invention of photography came about because the invention of photography and the invention of cameras itself that now are surveilling us came from that camera obscura, that hole in a hole.